There is a very specific sound that a multi-million-dollar company makes right before it completely implodes. It is a low metallic rattle that vibrates through your teeth, signaling that greed has finally overtaken common sense. I spent 15 long years preventing that noise from happening at our local data hub, working as the invisible backbone of the entire county network. My name is Cheryl, and I am the only reason the local hospitals and emergency lines stay online. Officially, my job description said operations supervisor, but in reality, I was a digital firefighter who rescued the company from disaster at 3 in the morning. The facility was owned by a man named Arthur, who treated the infrastructure like a personal ATM while ignoring basic maintenance. During the Great Power Grid collapse a decade ago, Arthur was relaxing at a luxury resort while I slept on the concrete floor for 4 days straight to keep the backup systems fueled. Because I saved the business during that crisis, massive contracts started rolling in from regional chemical refineries and medical networks. I knew every single cooling valve, every loose wire, and every temperamental circuit breaker in that massive concrete warehouse. My signature was literally plastered all over the lobby walls on federal compliance certificates and insurance liability forms as the sole designated master operator. Arthur owned the physical bricks, but my legal license kept the doors open. Everything changed on a stormy Tuesday morning when Arthur called an unexpected meeting and introduced his son, Julian. Julian was fresh out of business school, wearing an expensive fleece vest and possessing an overwhelming amount of unearned confidence. He spoke in ridiculous corporate buzzwords like workflow optimization and asset disruption, looking at our complex network as if it were a simple lemonade stand. I could tell immediately that this boy had never held a tool in his life. Arthur cleared his throat and announced that Julian was taking over my position as Director of Operations effective immediately. They were moving me to a newly created role called Senior Data Archivist, which was just a polite term for a filing clerk. They expected me to sit in a corner and organize old paperwork while Julian modernized our strategy. I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me, realizing my years of loyalty meant absolutely nothing. Instead of screaming or causing a scene, I simply nodded and accepted the transition packet from the human resources representative. My new workspace turned out to be a converted broom closet near the loading dock that smelled like exhaust fumes. As I sat at my cheap folding table, I realized they wanted to steal my decades of experience so they could eventually discard me entirely. But they made one massive mistake when they banished me to the archives. I began opening the dusty cardboard boxes filled with old regulatory documents and insurance policies that Arthur had ignored for years. As I reviewed the fine print, a sudden realization made me smile for the first time in days. The federal disaster grants and the emergency hospital contracts explicitly stated that the facility must be managed by a licensed Level 4 operator. That meant without my specific credentials attached to daily operations, the entire business was in legal default. My lead technician, a brilliant kid named Toby, texted me that Julian was demanding all administrative passwords to audit user privileges. I told Toby to give Julian exactly what he wanted, and to document every single request in writing. I instructed the team to follow his orders perfectly, and to never correct his mistakes unless he provided written instructions. If they wanted me to be a simple archivist who filed papers, I was going to do exactly that. Within 1 week, Julian decided to raise the server room temperature significantly to save money on electricity, ignoring the manufacturer safety guidelines. He also ordered the team to halt the weekly backup generator testing because the engine noise disrupted his video conference calls. I quietly logged every single dangerous directive in my compliance journal, building an airtight paper trail of absolute negligence. I knew the fragile system would not survive the brutal summer heat without proper care. I called Victor, the safety director at the regional hospital network, under the guise of updating our administrative contact list. I casually informed him that I was no longer overseeing the operational safety protocols and that Julian was handling all system alerts. Victor became completely silent on the phone before stating that their legal team would be incredibly concerned about this sudden change. The first domino had been pushed, and the trap was officially set. A massive Texas thunderstorm slammed into the county the following week, causing the local power grid to fail completely. The emergency backup generators were supposed to kick in automatically, but Julian had ruined the maintenance schedule. Generator number 3 suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure because Julian had forced a manual shutdown during its last cycle. The primary transfer switch became hopelessly jammed between the grid and the backup power, leaving the facility helpless. The red emergency lights began flashing in my closet as the backup batteries started draining rapidly. Suddenly, Arthur and Julian burst through my door, both of them drenched in sweat and hyperventilating from sheer panic. Arthur screamed that the hospital system was offline and the refinery monitors were failing, which could result in millions of dollars in lawsuits. They begged me to save them, demanding that I fix the high-voltage machinery immediately. I remained calmly seated, reminding Julian that he had removed my operational authority to eliminate legacy thinking. Arthur wept openly, explaining that the hospital was terminating their contract and the business would face complete bankruptcy within minutes. I told them I could manually override the jammed switch and stabilize the power grid under 2 strict conditions. Julian had to leave the property forever, and I required a 45% raise alongside a permanent board seat. Arthur did not even hesitate before signing the emergency contract modification that I had already prepared on my desk. I grabbed my heavy tool belt, walked out into the flashing red chaos of the server room, and forced the manual lever forward. The remaining generators roared to life, and the digital screens blinked back to green as power stabilized across the county. Julian gathered his things in total silence and departed into the pouring rain. That day taught me that true authority does not come from a fancy job title or an expensive fleece vest. It comes from the quiet competence of the people who actually know how to keep the world running smoothly. If you have ever dealt with a toxic boss who underestimated your value, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Sharing your thoughts in the comments helps other hardworking souls realize their true power.